A summary of 373 years unbroken service to the Crown. The Royal Scots Museum in Edinburgh Castle tells the story of the British Army's oldest and most senior infantry regiment, and its unique history of 373 years of unbroken service to the Crown. The story started around 1625 with Sir John Hepburn's Green Brigade of Scots mercenaries in the service of King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden during the 30 Years' War. On Sir John's return to Scotland, he was summoned by King Charles I, who issued him with a royal warrant on the 28th of March 1633 to raise a regiment of Scotsmen from all the kingdom. Originally known as Hepburn's Regiment, spending its first 30 years in the service of the King of France, the Royal Scots have also been known as the 1st Regiment of Foot, the Royal Regiment of Foot, the 1st or Royal Scots Regiment, the Royal Scots Lothian Regiment, and finally, the Royal Scots, the Royal Regiment. As the senior infantry regiment, we traditionally occupied the place of honour at the right of the line. As the first regiment to be raised, we gained the Army's first battle honour, Tangier 1680, while ejecting the Moors from the port which had been part of the dowry of Catherine of Braganza, wife of King Charles II. The 30 Years' War was followed in the early 1700s by the War of the Spanish Succession, and the regiment fought in the Duke of Marlborough's great battles of Blenheim, Ramillies, Oudenarde, and Malplaquet. By then, the 2nd Battalion of the regiment had been raised in 1686 and continued unbroken service until merging with the 1st Battalion in 1949. Both 1st and 2nd Battalions fought with Marlborough. During the Napoleonic Wars, the regiment was expanded to 4 battalions, which campaigned in North America, the West Indies, India, Egypt, Corsica, Portugal, Spain, France, and finally at Waterloo. The 3rd Battalion earned the battle honours of the Peninsular Campaign, most notably San Sebastian, which was credited to be the hardest fought action in the regiment's history, and went on to fight at Quatre Bras, the prelude to Waterloo, and at Waterloo itself. A century in which the regiment served in India, Burma, Crimea, China, and South Africa lapsed before the Great War, in the course of which 100,000 men served in the regiment, more than the strength of the British Army today. They were organised in 35 battalions, more than the infantry of the line today. Casualties were commensurately high, with more than 11,000 killed and 40,000 wounded. The dead were subsequently commemorated in the Scottish National War Memorial in Edinburgh Castle, at the regiment's Living War Memorial, the Royal Scots Club in Edinburgh, and at the memorial gates at Glencorse Barracks, our former training depot. Whereas the Great War formally ended with the armistice in November 1918, the 2nd 10th Battalion returned home only in June 1919 from northern Russia, where they had been part of an expeditionary force supporting the White Russians against the Bolsheviks. They returned with the battle honour Archangel and a captured Bolshevik artillery piece. In the Second World War, there were 5 battalions, although more than 1,200 Royal Scots made the ultimate sacrifice. In May 1940, the 1st Battalion, along with 2nd Battalion Royal Norfolks, fought an entire SS division to a standstill at the village of Le Paradis just to the west of the Belgian border, in helping to protect the Dunkirk evacuation beaches. Only 33 Royal Scots returned to British shores, mostly wounded. The remainder were either dead, wounded, or captured at Le Paradis. The reformed 1st Battalion re-entered the fray in India, where they fought in the key battle at Kohima and joined the pursuit of the Imperial Japanese Army through Burma, today's Myanmar. In December 1941, the 2nd Battalion fought a gallant but hopeless battle in the new territories of Hong Kong and subsequently on Hong Kong Island against Japanese invaders. The survivors remained in captivity in appalling conditions until September 1945, some being shipped to Japan, having survived the sinking of the Lisbon Maru. The George Cross was awarded posthumously the highest order of gallantry to Captain Douglas Ford, who, despite having been captured, continued to be active in an intelligence-gathering network, which was exposed and Ford was tortured and eventually executed. In 1942, the 12th Battalion was retitled the 2nd Battalion and deployed to avenge the original 2nd Battalion by breaching the Gothic line in Italy. Meanwhile, the 79th Battalion was training in mountain warfare in the Cairngorms in anticipation of the liberation of Norway. Ironically, their route into the liberation of northwest Europe was via the Netherlands, where they fought in flooded polders, some below sea level. The 8th Battalion landed in Normandy after D-Day and took part in all three of the major river crossings on the way to the Baltic. Since the end of the Second World War, only in 1968 and 2016 have British soldiers not been killed while serving Queen and Country. Reduced to a single regular battalion in 1949, the 1st Battalion deployed to Korea shortly before the ceasefire and was active during the Cyprus Emergency of 1955 and the Suez Operation in 1956. Peacekeeping in Aden in 1964 was followed by recurring service in the British Army of the Rhine as the Cold War deepened. Against the background of the Cold War, the need for counterinsurgency emerged in Northern Ireland, and the 1st Battalion was deployed to all the trouble spots at intervals from 1970 to 2002. When not in Northern Ireland, the 1st Battalion was ski-borne on the northern flank of NATO, back in Cyprus for the emergency of 1974, formed the Falkland Islands garrison after liberation from Argentine invasion, and in the former Yugoslavia. In 1991, the 1st Battalion formed one of the warrior-equipped battle groups in the liberation of Kuwait, earning the regiment's final battle honours, Gulf 1991, and however, it was in 2006, following the Defence Review that ordered all the famous regiments of the Scottish Division to march into history in favour of the new Royal Regiment of Scotland, that 1st Battalion, the Royal Scots, the Royal Regiment, paraded to remove their cherished cap badge from their bonnets and replace it with the badge of the new regiment. What is both ironic and remarkable is that this was done during operations in Iraq. It was as if the government was saying that 149 battle honours were no longer of any consequence, but that the same dedication to duty would be required nevertheless. There was bitter disappointment. Nevertheless, the fine traditions of Scotland's oldest regiment are carried forward by the 1st and 6th Battalions of its newest regiment, whose rather shorter story is also told in the museum. Our motto, and that of Scotland itself, is Nemo me impune lacessit, in the Latin spoken by Sir John Hepburn. No one assails me with impunity, in Oxford English. and What O'er Medal Wi' Me in broad Scots, normally issued as a challenge. Further detail on each of these periods can be found by clicking on the titles below.